It's so good to be here. And so one of the things I want to talk about is kind of radical entrepreneurship. Ways in which when we get past the protest, what do we want to see in our communities? What do we want to do in our communities? And then how do we realize those radical moments? So I'll talk a little bit about myself. I'm an artist on Mondays. I'm a builder Monday afternoons. And in the evening, I work for this place called the University of Chicago, where I'm able to kind of assess the work that I do in the daytime and afternoon. I feel like I wear three hats. And part of what I've learned is that when you have a real desire to see radical change happen in a neighborhood, in this case, I work mainly in Greater Grand Crossing. We now have 65 buildings, about 200,000 square feet of industrial and cultural space that we've managed since about 2006. These buildings were intentionally about trying to create a cultural space in the middle of the hood where black artists and black creatives could help stabilize a place that people were fleeing from. Sister Jane made this beautiful point that symbols and images are really just kind of stand-ins for ideas and beliefs. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of demonstrate through the restoration of the Stony Island Arts Bank is that for the 30 years that we've all driven past this building on 68th and Stony, one simple move of restoration could change the speed at which we drive. That restoring that building would make us slow down. And by slowing down a little bit, we might imagine a new kind of South Side. That in the same way that Natalie is trying to kind of share new narrative stories, I was trying to make real and concise incisions in the architectural fabric of the South Side so that we would know that black people are interested in investing in black places. The idea that a black person would invest in a black space for some other reason than financial gain never happens. The fact that some of us are in our condominiums on 69th and Dorchester because the market changed, but if we didn't have to be upside down in that condo, we'd be gone, is a real telling story. It's a telling story because you bought the condo when you were 30, you now have a child, and violence sometimes happens. And that really, we want to be in good schools. We don't want to be around violence. And so what are the mechanisms for a normal black person who wants to live in the hood, but really doesn't feel like they have the capacity to fight all of the things that seem to weigh against them and their 2-year-old? So I bought the buildings. 2008, I bought every building that I could. I bought them because people were still in the copper pipes. That the building next door was flooding my basement because water was running all day. That I had to become the water department and people's gas and the county assessor. That in a way there was no CDFI or CDC. I had to become my own chamber of commerce. Shit, I had to become my own bank. Because I don't know how David does it. I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes the radical reoccupation of a black space requires more than an incentive, it requires a calling. It requires that we actually really just want to be around our people. That the investments that we make, sometimes they won't make as much resource, and sometimes we don't know how long the patient capital has to be patient. But that's why it's radical. That we invest in places because we believe in them. And by investing because we believe, sometimes we make unexpected things happen. An example. I found out that the Stony Island Arts Bank was going to be torn down. People started to imagine that this thing was going to be something else. And the folk who had the most anxiety about whether or not this was worth it, they called it a black albatross, that there's no way that I should take the last of my little resources and invest in this bank. They called me back and they said, Theaster, we knew you could do it. This is exciting. Why don't we give you that loan now? Right? Because I think that people want to be on the side of things that are working. Right? And so it's like, how could I, as an artist, demonstrate with positive images, and in this case, positive architectural images, the images of black men and women working in black neighborhoods for black businesses, how could I project that back into the world as a gesture that Grand Crossing wasn't as bad as we thought it was? And that I would use my artistic prowess to do it. I would try to create rumor and gossip and desire so that people would want to live adjacent to the buildings that I was working on, that they would want to do things at the Stony Island Arts Bank, that they would imagine themselves again as participants, maybe dwellers in the hood. And so I guess the one thing that I wanted to suggest that's different from a kind of conventional model of reinvestment is if we understand that radical black occupation of black space requires belief in black space, then what does that mean for policy and governance and folk who manage bond financing and Freddie Mac and and Fannie Mae? What does it mean if that the people who are on the front line of creating neighborhood change is having to do this from a hard place? What does it mean for a loan? What does it mean for a development officer? What does it mean for the philanthropic community and foundation program officers? How can we help the pursed and financed community understand how to believe with us in the neighborhoods that we're trying to transform? But I really wanted to make a case this morning for the power of culture, because what I found in the restoration of the Stony Island Arts Bank was that once the announcement of the Obama Center happened, that all of a sudden the bank and the land adjacent to the bank made me seem like a kind of real estate mogul. That in fact, what led my investment in the Stony Island Arts Bank was because I believed that black people deserve amazing spaces for hospitality and culture. And the byproduct of that was that other high net worth, highly profited things would kind of become adjacent. But I already knew that the golf course was dope. I've seen amazing things happen that I never thought could happen on the South Side simply because there was a place there where people could posit themselves. And I think that instead of always imagining the lowest common denominator, we should try imagining the highest denominators for Black life. Thanks very much.